Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about gen identity. Before moving ahead, before explanation, I would like to present one MCQ that I found in one entrance. The question is, what is the primary focus of the concept of gen identity introduced by Kurt Lewin? And your options are option A, the genetic inheritance pattern in living organism. Option B, mentioning the continuity of identity over time despite changes. Option C, mentioning the influence of social factors on individual behavior, and option D, mentioning the process of cognitive development in children. As you can see here, this is the question that I found in one entrance, right? What is the primary focus of the concept of gen identity introduced by Kurt Lewin? After watching this video, I think you will not face any difficulties, any problem to answer questions related to gen identity. So let's begin. The concept of gen identity was introduced by Kurt Lewin, right? Here's Kurt Lewin. And Kurt Lewin presented this particular concept in 1922. And they presented a paper in this year in 1922. The paper name of that particular paper was The Concept of Genesis in Physics, Biology and Developmental History. The paper was The Concept of Genesis in Physics, Biology and Developmental History. So what I am mentioning, right, gen identity that we are going to talk about, gen identity is presented by Kurt Lewin in 1922 in the paper, and name of that particular paper was The Concept of Genesis in Physics, Biology and Developmental History. This paper is the foundation of various theories in psychology and in the development of concept of gen identity, right? So gen identity is the short name for genetic identity. So genetic identity and gen identity is same. Gen identity is the concept presented by influential psychologist Kurt Lewin, as we are discussing, right? It's a philosophical and psychological idea that help us understand how an object and how an entity maintain its identity over time despite undergoing various changes. So if there are changes happening in any object, in any entity, how they maintain their identity over time. So there are few key points in gen identity. So when we talk about the key points in gen identity, the first point I would like to mention, that is continuity through change. Continuity through change. And second, we will mention, right, historical time. But we have to understand clearly, but there are three key points that I would like to discuss here. Third key point is physical and psychological application. Physical and psychological applications. Physical and psychological applications. So I'm mentioning there are three key points of gen identity. First key point of gen identity is continuity through change. The essence of gen identity is the idea that an entity or any object remain the same throughout continuous changes. For example, a river is always flowing and changing itself. Still, we recognize it as the same river. So there will be various changes. Various changes will happen over there. Maybe their flow will change, right? Maybe their area will change, but we recognize them as the same river. Second key point you can find, historical time. So gen identity emphasizes the historical dimension of time. It focuses on how an entity passed, how any entity, right, a past time or what, right, kind of changes happened in the past influence their present state, and how this continuous timeline impacting their identity. So in historical time, we can say in this particular key point, right, in gen identity, we are trying to understand how any entity and how any objects changes in the past impacting their current identity or identity right now in this particular moment. And third point that I am mentioning here in key point, according to Kurt Lewin, physical and psychological application could be a major key point of gen identity. Originally, gen identity is a philosophical idea that can be applied in psychology to understand continuous or personal identity in the presence of physiological and psychological changes over time. That means when we talk about physical and psychological application, that means gen identity allows us to understand identity of something, identity of any entity, identity of any object when there will be so many physiological and psychological changes. Right? Now we will try to understand them in simplified way. What is the simplified way to understand this gen identity? If I will simplify in a simple way, I will say gen identity is like the version of you over time. But we have to understand one thing. How you was in childhood, how you was in adolescent, how you was after adolescent, that means every day there will be changes in you, right? So this particular theory, in a very simple way, we can say gen identity is like the version of you over time. Despite we all are growing older, you are growing older, changing your opinion, we all are finding, yes, there are changes in opinion. Whenever we are growing, opinion will change. We are learning new things and experiencing life in a different manner, but we remain same as we are. You will remain same as you are. What I mean to say, gen identity simply means you remain you in those particular situations when there will be changes in opinion, when there will be changes in physical appearances, when you will learn new things, when you will experience new things, but you remain you. This concept helps us understand how entity and how any object maintain their core identity while constantly evolving. While they are doing so many changes in their life, we can easily identify that there will be many changes in their life, maybe in their opinion, maybe in their learning, maybe in their experiences, maybe in their physical appearances, but their identity will remain the same. Just look around you, right? Things changing over time, like tree changing themselves, mountain changing themselves. And you too, you can look, at your physical appearances, you can look at your, understanding, maturity, you can look around your experiences, right? All these things changing, but identity remains same. So we can take one example. Imagine a plant growing from a seed. Over time, it changes into a sprout, then a young plant, and then finally a mature tree. With all these changes, we understand that it is the same plant. There will be so many changes, but still we consider them as the same plant. We consider them same plant throughout their life cycle. This continuity, despite this particular changes will be there, but this continuity is gen identity is all about. So this continuity in their identity is gen identity. So there will be so many changes, right, in that particular plant, in you, right, in any entity. But despite so many changes, there will be same identity, there will be identity, right, in a continuous manner, identity will continue, but there will be so many changes. We can say that is gen identity. Now, I'm very hopeful that you will be able to answer this particular question without any help and without any support. You can see what was the question in the beginning that I presented, right? What is the primary focus of the concept of gen identity introduced? This is the question. This was the question. Option A mentioning the genetic inheritance patterns in living organism, the continuity of identity over time despite changes, the influence of social factor on individual behavior, and option D mentioning the process of cognitive development in children. And we talked just now Gen identity simply means there will be so many changes, but identity of that entity will remain same. So you can see second will be the more appropriate answer, the continuity of identity over time despite changes. So gen identity help us understand how any individual maintaining their identity, right? But there will be certain changes. So with changes, there are certain changes happening over there, but how their identity will continue. So B will be right answer. Hopefully you are learning something new. So see you next time. Bye. Take care.